pre-show quid pro quo. Wren, you get one question. It can be any question in the world. It could be, what is my favorite herb to put on pasta? It could be, what's my favorite episode of The Simpsons? It could be, who's my favorite painter of all time? You have one question. Go ahead and ask it, sir.
All right, Doug, have you ever seen a UFO or a cryptid? And if so, can you describe your sighting?
Yeah, I've seen several UFOs. I'm trying to think of the best one to go for. The best one to go for would have been one. It was the most striking one. I was about 17 years old. My parents were out of the house for like 4 or 5 days, and I had the house to myself. I was young, and I smoked. Like I did smoke weed, but I wasn't crazy into it. But I would just smoke weed enough to get a little dozy, if you will, and. I was watching some TV show, and then there was a light in the front yard. We lived out in the country. We lived there. There weren't houses around us. Like we were somewhat secluded. So it was one of those classic things where I went outside to investigate what the light was, and there was just a giant light in the sky and a faint outline of I want to say triangular craft, but. Or something. I don't know what it was, but it was very light and it was just hovering there. I had a golden retriever at the time, and she came out as well. And she also sat and looked at the whatever it was. And it just stayed there. And then eventually it just slowly moved on. Like it was a very bizarre. And again, I wasn't ridiculously out of my head. It was very. I just remember it being utterly normal. It was just a light in the sky, and then it went off, and I went back inside, and I don't think I did. I think I just sat there for another 3 hours just thinking about what I'd seen. But yeah, it was a very strange experience. The last UFO I saw was in Mexico, and it was somewhat far off, and it was floating above a hill in Morelia, Mexico. I was on my mother's balcony. She used to live down there. And it was just classic, just object in sky doing weird things. And then it zipped. It was just gone. It was incredibly strange. But those are the two experiences that the other one's very banal, just kind of like, I don't really, that could be somewhat or anything. But yeah, those are the two UFO ones. Cryptid, I just shared it recently with somebody on Twitter, but I went to, my family used to spend time at Lake Okanagan in British Columbia, Canada, which is Kelowna. And they're famous for a lake monster called Ogopogo. I had been fascinated by cryptids when I was younger, and I really wanted to see Ogopogo. I was obsessed with Ogopogo, and the last night that we were there, we were camping there for about 5 days. I went down and hung by the lake, and I thought I was just reading, I think I was reading X-Men comic books or something like that at the time. And there was a disturbance in the water, and it looked like a car tire just kind of like arced through the water like 3 times. So it was just like classic. These things are they're boring because it's almost like you're just expecting it to happen the way that it does. So as far as major cryptid, that's the really big one. But those are some experiences that I've had. So
Excellent.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Wren. That's a great question. Hey everybody, welcome to What Magic Is This, a podcast that wonders if Chatty Cathy has a silver cord. In this program, we're going to be talking, that was the worst intro I've ever done. I'm sorry for everybody to have to listen to that one, but I apologize. If you know what any of that stuff is, good for you. You get 50 plus internet points. Anyways, in this podcast, we're going to be talking about magic, the occult, the esoteric, the supernatural, the paranormal, and the weird. Now, if you've never listened to the show, what normally happens is I have a guest on, and they get to pick a topic, and I bring them on the show, and we talk about it. But this is going to be a bit more of a back to that special episode kind of thing. My guest is going to do quite a bit of the talking on this one. It's not just going to be me lecturing. I am joined today by a very special guest by the name of Wren Collier. How are you, Wren?
I'm doing great, Doug. How are you?
Lovely, fantastic. I got home, and in preparation for this episode, I put on, I think it was Marconi's Union's Weightless, and I just laid down for a little bit just to come down for the day, and just relax a bit, but I'm rip-roaring and ready to go. So, nice. Wren, I reached out to you about 4 months ago. You had just released a show in which you were interviewing, I believe it was Patrick Harper, the author of Demonic Reality. And I said, I'd like to have you on the show. I think if we could talk about demons, that would be wonderful. And you said, absolutely, sure, let's do it. I have to get some shows out of the way, but then I'll get to you. And I never forgot. It was just, I got wound up and things happened. But about 3 weeks ago, I said, are you ready to do a show? I know I first approached you and said that I'd like to do a show about demons, but is there something else you'd like to talk about? And you said, well, here's some things that I find very interesting. And you listed a couple of topics. And then you said, a lot of people don't really know this, but I'm more so than something like ceremonial magic, I'm much more hyped on out-of-body experiences and active imagination and journeying. And I said, okay, give me a day, because you listed some cool topics, but I have to think about this. And so I took that day, and then the next day I said, you know what? A lot of people have been asking, what is journeying? Doug, you say journeying a lot on your program. What is this thing? And so I had to pull the trigger. I said, you know what, Wren, we are going to talk about journeying. So this episode is going to be just what is journeying and everything that it encompasses: journeying, active imagination, remote viewing, out-of-body experiences, and so much more. For this episode, Wren knows what he's talking about. I sent him a little paradigm as to how the show was going to go, and he just wrote back this answer that completely blew my mind. And I just said, thank you for replying to this email, the best email I've ever got. But it was one of those things where I just had to take a step back. I was like, I'm glad that we're going to be talking about this kind of thing. So, Wren, let's get into it. Are you ready?
I'm totally ready.
So, before anything, what is journeying, and how would you define it, sir?
So, journeying is actually a term that I personally don't like that much. And this isn't any hit to anybody who likes to use that term. I just think it's very imprecise.
Right.
And when I'm talking about these sort of things, I like precision, because I think that that is the only way for us to really explore the experiences and learn more about them. So I break journeying up into, let's say, two different categories. So on one hand, you have the out-of-body experience. That is an experience in which a person physically is a weird word, but
I hear you.
Completely leaves their body, right? It's not experienced in a meditative state, a trance state. It's not sitting there and seeing things in your mind. It is, you become a ghost, right? And you can walk through walls.
Yes.
And you can travel to other dimensions. It's a completely insane experience. The other side of journeying, and this is where I think people conflate these, and you see even scientists like Diana Pasulka Walsh conflating these things, and it drives me crazy. It really gets the inner pedant in me screaming. I will fully admit that these two things are probably related, right? There probably is some common ground between the out-of-body experience and what we would call active imagination or remote viewing.
Right.
I conflate those two because I think the process of active imagination, or some people may know it as like path working, guided meditation, that sort of thing, it is essentially the same procedure as remote viewing.
Right.
I.e., you never really leave your body. You know you're still sitting in the room, sitting in a chair, sitting in the lotus position, or however you want to sit, and you're seeing images play out in your mind. Now, I'm not saying that one of these experiences is any more valid or real than the other.
Right.
Just that they are different on an experiential level. Joe McMoneagle, who I defer to a lot for remote viewing stuff, is very, very clear about this in his books, because he has had OBEs that he experienced after his near-death experience, and he was the Army's first remote viewer. So he knows that they are two very different experiences. But again, it's not a judgment of quality or validity or anything. They're just different.
Right.
I didn't realize that people didn't really make this distinction until I was talking to my mentor, Scott Stenwick, about astral projection, or I think we were talking about how Crowley says, you could do Liber Resh, wherever. You could do it on a busy train by just imagining your astral body doing it.
Yes.
And he was talking about that, and he was like, yeah, I can just, imagine my astral body doing it, and that's astral projection. I'm like, wait a minute. That's not what I experience, right? I can imagine myself standing across the room and doing a ritual, but that's not what I'm talking about when I talk about an out-of-body experience. No. it's one of those things that's even kind of hard to even put a nail on. I think the experience of the OB varies differently from person to person. One interesting thing, I've been rereading Journeys Out of the Body in prep for the show, and Monroe mentions that his OBEs are in black and white. Mm-hmm. And I never picked up on that when I first read the book. I only noticed that on my, I don't know how many times I've read it, but this most recent reading. And I don't experience that.
No.
Some people have the experience of seeing their self laying in bed, right? They see their physical body. I've never seen my physical body during any of my OBEs. I've looked back at the bed to see if I was there, and I would see the impression of a body there, but I would never actually see my physical form there.
Oh, that's very interesting. Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I've never seen a silver cord either. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, I trust that plenty of people have described the silver cord, so yeah. I appreciate that it's a possibility, but I've never seen it.
Right. In the email that I sent you, you said that you have these two camps, and they're very different, and the way that you put it was very eloquent. You said you have active imagination, and then you have out-of-body experiences, and you say that think of the difference between the two as one is watching a remote camera from your office versus getting in the car and traveling there physically, right? So
yes, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. I love it. So what experience have you had that make this such a topic of interest to you personally? Yeah.
So I've had spontaneous OBs ever since I was a child. Both me and my little brother have them fairly frequently. I just had my most recent one a couple of days before this show. Maybe it was from reading Journeys Out of the Body again. It kind of got me, in the right mental state, but I have them fairly frequently, at least a handful of times, every month or two. And it was something that started when I was really young with sleep paralysis experiences, particularly sleep paralysis experiences involving entities coming into my room. And as a child, I was very into the X-Files and watched sightings and stuff. So I was absolutely terrified that I was being abducted by gray aliens. So I never actually saw a gray alien, mind you. I just knew that that's what was happening. And it wasn't until I later found writers like Robert Bruce, who wrote Astral Dynamics, and Robert Monroe's books, that I more understood like what was happening to me, like what this vibration was that I was feeling as I was falling asleep, and like how to actually leave that state and not be so scared of it.
Right. Now, that's out-of-body experiences. They seem to happen to you quite frequently, and that seems like something that you can't control, or can you?
I think that you can intentionally learn, maybe, to have OBEs. The Monroe Institute teaches a whole seminar on this, and Monroe seemed to be able to do it himself, though not with 100% reliability, right? It still seemed like when I read his book, I get more the impression that it's a thing that just sort of happens and he takes advantage of it. And that, like, out of the hundreds of OBEs I've had, I've only maybe intentionally induced it twice that I can think of. One when I was like a teenager, and one several years later. It is extremely hard just to, at least for me, just to induce it on purpose.
Right.
Usually what happens is that I will feel it coming on as I'm going to sleep. Usually I feel like a warmth come over my body. I feel like I'm humming, like my entire body, like I'm holding a live wire, like I'm vibrating. And I'll usually have all these, hypnagogic sort of side effects, like hearing choruses of voices in the air, or humming, or buzzing of bees, or wind rushing, or whatever. There's all these little things that come with it.
Right.
It really depends on my mood at the time. If I'm really not in the mood to do this, I will just like fight the sleep paralysis until I can move, and then just walk it off. But if I'm in the mood for an adventure, I will sort of let it take me into the out-of-body state. Which, when I was younger, was very difficult to remove myself from my body. It was almost like I was very sticky, and I was like I was bursting out of cellophane or something. But as I've gotten older, the exit has become so easy that my most recent one a few days ago, I just felt like I floated right out, like barely
came to you like naturally, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Now, the other form of, again, to use the term journeying, the more inhibitory, purposeful things like active imagination. Do you do that as well?
So I don't do it as much as I should. I should probably practice the thing I've been taught in. I was formally trained in coordinate and remote viewing by one of Lynn Buchanan's students last year. Before that, I had done sort of some amateur stuff, but actually having a real teacher and actually learning the actual CRV method the Army taught really helped that practice along. I need to practice more than I do so I could keep those skills sharp. There's almost a weird... This might sound really silly, but maybe you'll understand. Like, there's a degree of performance anxiety that comes with doing remote viewing.
Okay.
When I first started training, I really, really knocked it out of the park,
Yeah.
like several times in a row. And it starts to build this pressure. Like,
Right.
when am I going to completely mess it up and
Right.
completely get it wrong? And
Ah.
it starts building this anxiety within yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's a tough thing to get over. I still struggle with that. So, but it is one of those things where it's like doing RV is easy. That's what I think a lot of people don't realize. I think that a lot of different, let's say like occult methodologies, especially people who are familiar with magic, right?
Right.
There's all this ritual and symbol involved. The neat thing about remote viewing is that it's totally independent of any metaphysical framework at all.
For sure.
It is its own thing. It doesn't require any ritual technique at all, really. Usually there's some sort of maybe guided meditation cool down period before you start to kind of relax you and stuff. But even that is just, there's nothing really new agey about it. It's just relaxation.
Right.
And actually doing RV, most people probably do it and don't even realize it during the day. Because RV is actually, this is a little tangent, RV is actually kind of a bad term for it.
So yeah, how would you explain somebody who's never heard of the term remote viewing?
Well, people, I'm sure, get in their mind like this idea of like using your mind like a security camera and seeing like this picture in your mind of something, when in reality it's more like remote sensing.
Right.
It's more like being able to reach your hands into a box and feel the contours of an object that is inside of it. You can use all of your senses in RV. You can use smell, you can use your sense of touch, you can use your hearing, and you're supposed to. It's more remote sensing is a better term for it, because it's all about taking these tiny bits of data from your target, just little touches and impressions, and trying not to let your conscious mind analyze it.
Get in the
because
way.
the minute you start putting something on it, building a story, as my mentor would tell me, that's when you start screwing up. That's what they call analytical overlay. Like, to give you a great example of this, one of my really successful RV sessions in which I got all the details but completely messed up on what it actually was. I had the I did my little touch, my sense, and to see like what I felt, and I felt like a sense of rotation. Okay. And I was like, and I saw red and white. I was like, okay, it's red and white. It's rotating. I feel like it's moving. I feel like there are people inside of it. It's a manufactured object. Just trying to put all these little details from it. Yeah. And at some point, I started thinking in my head about a Cessna airplane, like a little two-seater airplane, red and white, flying in the sky, when the propeller was what I was sensing about the rotating movement. Right. In reality, it was actually a riverboat, a red and white riverboat with a big water, big wheel on the front that was rotating. Yes. And there were people standing on top of it, like on the observation deck and stuff. So it's like I had all the little details, right? But when my mind started to actually put those details together, it screwed it all up, because
that's incredible, though.
We're pattern finding machines. Our minds want to find patterns in things, and it wants to put them together. And that's what kept us alive on the savannah, millions of years ago. But when you're trying to do something like RV and actually get accurate results, you have to let that go. Like let the analysts, let the pencil pushers figure out what it is you're viewing, right? Just give them the details.
Yes.
And that's what a lot of people don't understand about RV too. RV is not a one-person thing. If you're going by actual RV protocol, which you should actually be using strict protocol for it, like you need to be completely blind to the target. Don't cheat, because it doesn't prove anything if you're cheating. Right. And usually, in a proper protocol, you have a tasker, the person who sets the target and sort of gives it the coordinate. Right. And then you have a person who delivers that task to the viewer to eliminate any possible telepathic transmission of the data between the tasker and the viewer. Right. You have a monitor who sits with the viewer while they're doing their task and asks them questions. And then you have an analyst who's blind to everything. All they get is the RV report. Right. And then they have to figure out what you were viewing. Yeah. And then they send that off, to whoever did the task so they can give feedback. Right. And it's a very complicated procedure, but it was developed that way in order to provide actionable intelligence, because it was being used in a military context.
Mm-hmm. Question, though. And this will be a thing that goes for both the more inhibitory modes like active imagination as well as the out-of-body experiences. And this would sound somewhat insulting to somebody like you who has out-of-body experiences on the regular. But what would you say to people that would say it's just your imagination?
I have no idea. It could be. I fully admit that. I was going to go into this at some point, but I don't find any experiential difference in the out-of-body experience versus lucid dreaming.
Okay.
The only difference between lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences is that you don't wake up into an out-of-body experience, right? Like there's no loss of consciousness. You're laying in bed, you come out of your body, you go off into, dream world, spirit realm. We'll talk about a little bit of that later, where we may be going when we do this. Now, there are people who have reported having veridical results. And Robert Monroe talks a little bit. He struggled with this constantly, right? Because he wanted to be able to prove to himself that this wasn't all in his head, right? So I think him and Charles Tart did a lot of experiments where they were trying to read numbers off of a piece of paper on top of a bookshelf or something. Right. And he had a lot of trouble doing these things because things are a little tricksy when you get out of body. Places that seem familiar are suddenly not familiar. And we can talk about this too, like about how when you're in that out-of-body state, you're primarily, until you learn to control it better, you're primarily driven by pure emotion rather than any sort of logical thinking.
And analytical, rational thinking.
Exactly. You're driven by your passions.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are people who have talked about veridical experiences, so I think it's possible. Monroe sort of divides it up into different, what he calls locales, right? Like locale 1 is the physical world that we all know and love. Right. And, it's possible to travel to these, to spots in the physical world in that out-of-body state. He says the problem is, and this actually, it's interesting because he wrote this in the 70s, and I wonder if it would be a little different today because we've all gotten so used to using Google Maps, but he talks about how, you try to go out of body and go to your friend's house, but once you get 100 feet up in the air, suddenly the world, you've never seen the world from this perspective. So you get lost really easily because, I mean, maybe try that. Maybe go to Google Maps and then try to navigate zoomed in as far as you can go and just see if you can find your way to your friend's house by looking at the tops of treetops and stuff. It's very difficult.
No doubt.
Now with RV, that is much more verifiable.
Right.
Because proper RV protocol needs to be of something where feedback is possible. Right. Now, this may tie into the idea that RV and maybe all divination is a sort of retrocausal time loop that you're setting up, right? Because if I remote view my target and then I'm shown my target, 2 days after I do my remote viewing and it's what I saw, did I really remote view, or did I remote view reality, or did I get that information from my future self somehow? Was the reveal sent back to me? Yeah. And that's a question that we can't really answer from our perspective in the universe. We'll never really know that.
Not yet.
We're not outside of space and time yet.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, again, I'm going to bring up the author again, Eric Wargo, who wrote Time Loops. He would say that you're actually honing in most likely on the celebration of getting the target. It's more about the fact that you got the reward. That's what you were actually intuiting more than anything. Yeah, no,
absolutely.
The whole imagination things, and that goes for both kind of forms that we're talking about here. The more laid back version, as opposed to the out of body experiences that we're so woefully terrible at talking about what imagination actually could be. I shared this with you over email. Is that Jeffrey Kripal? He was at my hero, one of my heroes. He was at Esalen, and he asked a group of 20 people before they got there to firstly think about an extraordinary experience that you had. It could be UFOs. It could be absolutely anything. And he also asked the people, have your experience ready to go, but also have a theory of imagination that explains the experience itself. And he found when everybody got there, all of the people who got there had an extraordinary experience, but not a single one of them. Every single one of them struggled to come up with a theory of imagination that would explain it. So it's one of those things where imagination, to me, I don't know if you find this as well, Wren, imagination is just one of those things that we tend to think that it's only one thing and that it's fanciful and fantasy, as opposed to a process that we have no idea how to even explain it or even come to terms with it, that might have vast ramifications in our life. I'm just throwing that out there, but imagination just seems like one of those words that people can use to just make things go away. We don't really understand it at all in any way. I don't know if you would agree.
So I see imagination and the creative mind as, and I'm going to get slightly Neoplatonic here. I hope you'll excuse me.
Do it.
But I see it as sort of the wellspring from which the material world manifests itself.
For sure.
Right? Like
Yeah.
without imagination, without sort of the ideal, you would not have the physical. There's actually a little bit in Journeys Out of the Body where Monroe describes locale 2, what he calls locale 2,
Right.
which what we would call as magicians the spirit world.
Got it.
Or the imaginal, if you like that better.
Sure.
He says locale 2 is a state of being where that which we label thought is the wellspring of existence. It is the vital creative force that produces energy, assembles matter into form, and provides channels of perception and communication. That's my perfect explanation of what imagination is. It is the fundamental building block of reality. Without it,
Bingo.
We can't make something unless we imagine it.
Yes, I totally agree. For people that are interested in this, there's a whole book from a somewhat idealism point of view called Dreamed Up Reality by Bernardo Kastrup, which is it's a fun book. I don't know if you've read it yet, Wren, or...
I haven't, no.
No, it's really quite wonderful in the sense that it's just like, guess what? The real things, the things you see around you, they're real as well. But guess what? Most of them, if not all of them, come from a dreamed up place, a place of imagination. So we're on the right track here. Wren, is there a history of journeying? And what is the history of journeying? And has this been something that we've always done?
So I think so. I think if we're talking about out-of-body experiences, I believe that they are fundamental. I mean, it's the experience of what people would, term the soul or the psyche or whatever. I believe it's always happened to people. I mean, near-death experiences are out-of-body experiences.
Yeah.
People have probably always had out-of-body experiences in one form or the other. In particular, there are some interesting... If you go back through, especially like the biblical literature,
Right.
There are saints that have these sort of bilocation experiences and these out-of-body experiences. I think the Prophet Muhammad had a very famous bilocation experience. These things happen, and that's what's interesting too, because you would say, oh, well, bilocation, people physically saw them in another place.
Right.
In some of Robert Monroe's experiences, people saw him in other places.
Yeah.
I believe that is a possibility, that people can see your projected form in another place. On the RV side of things, it has a very interesting sort of Cold War spy thriller history that people should really read up on, mainly because it ties into a lot of things.
Give us the short version. Give us the juicy summary, if you will, if you can.
Yeah, totally. So, I believe it was 1978. Yeah. So Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ in 78 at SRI, or Stanford Research Institute, started a program for remote viewing using people from the Army. Specifically, the Army was finding... They were trying to round up psychics, basically. They were trying to find people who had near-death experiences, people who had any sort of psi potential at all, and putting them into these programs.
Sorry to interrupt. Had the Russians been doing this before the Americans had?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe there was Russian research on this before the Americans started, and in some accounts I've heard that it was knowledge of this Russian program that spearheaded our own program. And then there's, from the more skeptical side of things, there's the idea that was disinformation from the Russians. Just to see if we would take it seriously.
Right.
So, I mean, I do know that, I mean, it is documented that the Russians had a robust RV program. In particular, the differences in the RV programs are interesting. Yeah. Like, all of the Army RV stuff was done at Fort Meade in Maryland, but for some reason, the Russian RV guys really enjoyed putting their remote viewers on the front lines. So there's accounts of basically frontline battlefield RVers in Chechnya during the war there, and it was said that it gave them more motivation to correctly RV things. A little sinister, but I believe they had a robust program too. McMonagle talks about meeting some of the, his contemporaries on the other side of the pond. Sometimes they would run into each other during remote viewings. There's this whole interesting side literature about RV countermeasures, because, if your enemies have the ability to view anything, you've got to figure out a way to protect against that. Different countries had their own way of doing this. The Russians in particular would have really sensitive meetings inside of brothels,
Oh.
because the sexual activity going in was really distracting to anybody trying to remote view the location. It's alleged that the Chinese would have them during festivals because the fireworks and explosions were very distracting. Any sort of strong emotion or very vibrant thing going on sort of jammed RV a little bit. But Joe McMoneagle was the first Army remote viewer. The actual remote viewing procedures that were taught to him were developed by Ingo Swann, which is a name that your listeners are maybe familiar with.
I hope so, everybody. Come on.
Yeah, if you're not, look up Ingo. He's great.
He is.
So Ingo Swann actually got the idea for coordinate remote viewing from Jacques Vallée, who is, first and foremost a computer scientist more than a ufologist, and he was also working at SRI, developing the internet. And so, the internet, the history of ARPANET as a DARPA project goes back to SRI. That's where it was originally developed with people like Jacques Vallée. A lot of people, that's what's so interesting about the history of RV to me, because so much of our modern world is tied up into it. The history of the internet, ufology with Vallée, just computing in general, like the very first chat program that was developed to work on ARPANET was developed in order to carry out remote viewing experiments. So, I mean, like, what we're talking on right now was originally developed as a way to do remote viewing experiments. So, yeah, if you're interested in the history of remote viewing, definitely read Mind Trek by Joe McMoneagle. I think also Ed Dames, I think Putoff's written books about it. There's a lot of books about the program. Lynn Buchanan, as well as another person who's part of that program. So it's super interesting, kind of like spooky Cold War stuff. The program was eventually killed, I think, in the late 90s. There's various sort of theories about why that was.
Nothing definitive.
Yeah, not really. I mean, the one I've always heard was that there was an element, the resurgence of sort of the religious right, that a lot of these people were members of the armed forces. In particular, there were in the Navy, there was a certain admiral who really disliked remote viewing and thought from a religious standpoint, not kosher to be doing. So from talking to some people like David Metcalf and Stephen Snyder, I don't know how much I really buy into that theory anymore. This whole Nick Redfern, Collins Elite thing. I do think that the religious right has a plan, especially like the prosperity gospel kind of stuff. Like that movement, I do think. I know Metcalf once told me that it's true that a lot of those people didn't like RV, but they also saw how useful it was, and so a lot of that technology was taken and then utilized by them to further their own agenda. And I don't think the Army's RV program was the only program. I think the CIA probably had a concurrent program running. Probably multiple agencies did. Today, I think most of it has moved into the private sector, similar to UFO research. I do know. This is just anecdotal. It's from someone I trust, though, but that they were contracted along with a group of people through the Institute of Noetic Sciences to do remote viewing for NASA pretty recently to do climate modeling. So at least according to these people, the government is still contracting RV from private sector, I guess mercenary RV groups. So I don't know, if you want to learn how to do RV, there may be some money in it for you.
No doubt.
That's sweet government money.
It's funny if you take a comparative look through history, as you mentioned earlier, specifically with people that are saints. If you look up Saint Clare of Assisi, who was a 13th century saint. It was her and Saint Francis of Assisi. She was supposed to attend a sermon. She was ill. Then when they came back to her, they said, "Oh, this is what you missed in the sermon." And she said, "No, I was there. I saw everything. I looked at my wall, and and so she related what she had seen to the nuns. And of course, stories can be apocryphal, but if you go through any of seemingly almost all world cultures have a thing where people go places in their mind or in their imagination. It's chock full. And if you apply a comparative lens to a lot of experiences, you will see that this is something that we've probably been doing for a very long period of time. One of my favorites, they're called Hesychism, which is Eastern Orthodox Christians they take from the Gospel of Matthew. Go into a room and stay there, and then God will send you a reward. And it's basically just shutting yourself in a room until you have visions. So it's this has seemingly been with us for a very, very long period of time. At least I'd like to think so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think scrying in particular is a variant on remote viewing.
Yeah.
I think the experience of scrying, a lot of the time I know my scrying, a lot of the time I see more things in my head than I see on the Black Mirror.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think the technology's always been there.
Right. We have to switch gears here. What about things like dreams and lucid dreaming? How do they play a part in your world? If anybody's friends with Wren on Twitter, you will have these amazing, wonderful, relate not just out-of-body experiences, but dreams that you had the night before. And some of them are just like, am I reading a Richard Brautigan novel? Like, what's going on here? Because they're really quite wonderful. But what role do dreams play in your life, and also within journeying in some way, shape, or form?
So absolutely. I think dreaming is a vital skill that people need to relearn, because I think we all know it when we're younger, and we're told constantly that, dreams are boring. I don't want to hear about other people's dreams. It's like this meme that nothing is more boring to hear than someone else's dream, which
disagree entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally want to hear about people's dreams. It is a skill, right? Because a lot of people have talked about this, so I won't go into it too much, but being able to recall your dreams is a skill that you can hone and develop.
Absolutely.
Setting enough time at night to sleep long enough to dream is also super important. Like, dreaming to me is another life that I live. I don't consider it going to sleep or, I don't know, resting or whatever. It is the other half of my life.
Yeah.
The things I experience in dreams, I don't necessarily create a strong distinction between them and my waking life.
Okay.
I tend to think of it in the way the Greeks thought about dreams.
Right.
If you met a god in a dream, then you met that god.
Yeah.
There was no real separation between the waking world and the world of dreams.
Yeah.
So much so that I'm convinced at this point that what we refer to as the dream world is cognate with or identical to the spirit world.
Agree. Yeah.
And if you're a magician, dreaming is essential.
100%.
Learning a bunch of rituals by heart is great and all, but if you're not paying attention to your dreams, you're missing out on one of the biggest aspects of being a magician.
It is the single largest vector through time for people to get spiritual experiences, divination. It is the ground, like at base, it is the biggest thing that we have used through time to have some kind of spiritual experience. Like, there's nothing that comes close, truthfully.
It is your primary interface with the spirit world.
Yes.
I know that, I know you've done ceremonial magic. I've talked plenty about, doing Goetia and Trithemian angel conjurations and all this.
Right.
But we have all the technology inside of our heads to talk to spirits.
Correct.
We don't need a black mirror. We don't need a 10-foot canvas circle and an ebony wand and all this stuff. If you've listened to Stephen Skinner talk about how difficult it is for spirits to manifest in the physical world, right? How much pomp and ceremony you have to go through to get a spirit to manifest. Yep. That's because for them, coming to our world is like a diver going down deep into the ocean with no scuba equipment, right? They can come for a little while, but they can't stay here long because it is alien to them. Right. It's not where they're supposed to be, right? They can only hold their breath for so long. And they don't want to swim down this deep if they don't have to. This ties into Greek necromancy as well, right?
Very much so.
You can conjure a spirit to physical appearance in Greek necromancy. If you have a couple of oxen that you can cut their throats and do this whole big ceremony and provide all these blood and sacrifices, or you can just go to sleep and meet the spirit there. And it's so much easier to just meet them by sleeping.
Yeah.
And I think if you're not paying attention to your dreams, especially if you're a magician, you are missing out on possible occult technology that spirits are trying to teach you.
Yep.
I remember, and this is why learning lucidity is important as well, being able to remember things from your dreams, because I swear some of these experiences will come back and haunt me later. But I had a dream several months ago about being in a bookstore with this kindly gentleman who looked awfully like what I imagine my HGA to look like.
Right.
And he was showing me all these amazing occult books I'd never seen before, these like grimoires that I'd never seen before, spirit sigils that I'd never seen in any grimoire.
Right.
And like these spells and stuff. I was like, oh, this is so cool. I've never seen these before. And he was like, yeah, you should remember these.
Oh.
And and then I woke up and I didn't remember any of it.
Oh, man.
You know, I like have these vague contours of what some of the seals looked like, but I couldn't draw any of them.
Right.
It's one of those things that I kick myself. It's like something was trying to show me something. And if only I'd been a little better at dream recall, I could have grabbed a little bit of that, you know?
I find that what helps, and it's when people ask me, and I do get emails, they'll say, how do you remember your dreams, or what's a better way of getting lucid? And truthfully, what I tell them is like one of the best things to do is literally set your alarm for maybe 2-3 hours after you go to sleep. Do that maybe 2 times a night to begin with, just to break things up. You will, if not remember your dream, sometimes that brings people to complete lucidity. Like after they wake up and then go back to sleep, it's like they slide straight into a lucid dream. Do you find that this helps as well, breaking a sleep schedule up?
I have never had much luck with the sleep-wake method.
Okay.
Because it's also a really popular OBE induction method. So if you do this and follow Doug's advice, you might have some OBEs too.
Yeah.
I've never had much luck with it. I've tried it, but I tend to wake up a lot at night when I sleep anyway. Okay. So I think I'm just used to it. I toss and turn a lot. Yeah. So yeah, I haven't had much luck with that method, but I have heard great things about it. So if it works for you, you know, and you're interested in trying it, by all means, go for it.
I think one of the things that I mentioned in my program, it was the astral projection soul flight episode, and maybe it was also in the dream episodes, is that what's unfortunate about this kind of stuff is that, and I wonder if you'd agree with me, Wren, is that it's so personalized. It's really the advice that I could give you. It's so variable for each person. Things that people have suggested to me to make lucid dream easier don't work. And then it's about finding your way, and it's really, really tough, but there's so many books out there. You can either read all of them or none of them, but as long as you're changing something up and at least trying different things, you'll know when you actually hit the sweet spot. And I don't know if you'd agree with that at all.
I totally do. A lot of people, you know, because I talk about my OBEs, you know, in different places, and people have asked me, how do I have OBEs?
Right.
And I kind of sadly have to tell them I have no idea. You've got to kind of find a method that works for you. I mean, I know for me, I'm more prone to them if I'm really physically exhausted before I lay down. You know, if I went for a long run or done a lot of weightlifting or something, very just exhausted, or if I sleep deprive myself, if I stay up for 2 days in a row and I'm so tired that the minute I lay down, I go into like sort of sleep paralysis.
Right.
That works for me. I don't know if it'll work for you. I don't know if it'll work for anybody else, because it really does seem to be very personalized. Certain people just have triggers for it that they have to identify. And you'll read a lot of books that'll give you all these methods for induction and everything. I think you just have to experiment until you find the thing that works for you.
And you will, truthfully. I think people actually can. And everybody dreams. Like it's one of those things. It's like everybody, we don't not have dreams. It's just the recall is sometimes difficult, but it's a very rewarding process. And I don't want to put a time frame on it, but could take a month of just changing things up every couple of days to maybe get things right. But you can, and I know you can.
I will say if melatonin supplementation is legal where you are, because it sometimes has weird legalities.
Right.
Depending on what country you're in. In the U.S., at least, it's legal. I will say that supplementing with melatonin does make my dreams more vivid.
Okay.
Doesn't necessarily enhance recall, but I think vividness does assist with it to some degree, right? Because the more vivid your dream, the more likely you are to wake up and remember it. Right. So maybe try that, you know, if you can get melatonin. In addition, and I was going to mention this, I think, later, but galantamine hydrobromide.
You're the second person to bring this up in a week to me. So I wanted to go to the internets and immediately look stuff up, but can you explain to me what this substance is?
So galantamine is a anti-Alzheimer's drug. At least that's what it's primarily used for. It has the interesting side effect of in some people, inducing out-of-body experiences or lucid dreams. Okay. In some places, at least in the U.S., you can buy it over the counter from supplement companies as a lucid dreaming aid or whatever. I think in particular, I've experimented with different dosages. The first time I started experimenting with it, I was taking a fairly heavy dose, like close to a therapeutic dose that like you would take if you had Alzheimer's.
Right.
And it definitely induced an OBE, but it was a very rough experience.
Okay.
It was it's really hard to put this into like words, but it felt like an engine that wasn't firing on all cylinders, right? Like it was shaky.
So was it like a car that could go down the road, but it was an old like Model T Ford or something like that? It was a rough ride.
Very rough ride, yeah. And so it kind of scared me off doing galantamine again, or using it. Recently, though, I've started experimenting with slightly smaller doses, more reasonable doses. So I think 8 milligrams for me seems to be the sweet spot. But if you're interested in trying galantamine, I would maybe just start with the 4 milligrams, which is like the lowest possible, dose. I mean, for anything like that, you want to start slow until you can figure out how it affects you. As far as safety goes, I haven't noticed any ill effects from galantamine. I mean, you don't really even feel it.
Right.
It's not like it has an actual effect on your cognition or anything. I just have been every now and then taking 8 milligrams about an hour before bed when I usually take my melatonin. I usually take melatonin every night. It's something that I have heard repeated in other places that galantamine was useful for OBEs. Yeah. I've talked to some other people who've tried it and it didn't work for them. Okay. So I honestly don't know. I don't know if it assisted with my experiences or if
you just had an OBE like in
normal. It was just coincidence. Yeah, right. It was just I didn't do, I guess, a proper controlled study. Right. So, and I don't think there are any proper controlled studies of its effects on that. So
interesting. Well, the future is bright, I'd say. For those who have a problem with remembering their dreams, there's a couple of other techniques that I definitely suggest to people, and that would be hypnagogia, which is that wonderful little twilight that you go to where you're still conscious but you're just about to fall asleep, and hypnopompia, which is it was a term that Frederick Myers came up in the 19th century, which is that state that you are in right after you wake up, and it's also a little bit of a twilight area. Can you explain perhaps why this might be a little bit beneficial for people that are having a tough time with dream recall? I constantly, both hypnagogia and hypnopompia are, I think, people are starting to, Jennifer Dumpert's one of them, they're starting to come out and basically say that this might be almost more prophetic than dreams themselves. What do you have to say to something like that?
Hypnagogia. I think learning about that state and learning how to get into that state and stay there, at least for some period of time, is extremely important, especially if you're wanting to do OBE stuff. Right. Because part of the trick is that you've got to catch yourself at the borderland. Yeah. Right? You've got to catch yourself right before you fall asleep. Yeah. But right at that moment where you lose like a good exercise would be when you're going to sleep at night, try to pay attention, try to remain consciously aware of what's going on as long as you can. Like try to remember the instant you fell asleep. Right. And if you can get better at getting to that borderland and staying in that borderland, interesting things can happen. I mean, from a prophetic standpoint, like you talked about, right. Sometimes you'll get very vivid flashes of imagery in your mind's eye. Sometimes in like the back of your eyelids, even, not even like in your head, but like you'll just have little visions of places and things.
My hypnopompia is, for some strange reason, is very good at picking up celebrity and or musician deaths. And
wow,
it's very bizarre. I think it might have something to do with the fact that I worked at video stores for a large portion of my life and I listened to a lot of music. But just recent examples, I'm very aware of what's happening when I come out of a sleep state. Figures will come up and there's no reason for them to come up. And it's not like a cavalcade where I'm flipping through images really quickly. They're there and they're present. And then I will wake up and I will either turn on BBC News or something like that, and they will have passed away. It happened with Ram Dass. It happened with Max von Sydow, the actor who was in The Exorcist, and it happened 2 weeks ago with Toots and the Maytals, the lead singer for that band. Forgive me, I forget his name, but for some reason that is I seem to have an aptitude for it, and it's quite bizarre. The thing that I think that Wren is really trying to say here is if you can catch yourself, or you can recognize that you're in these states, they are incredibly interesting. They're, at least for me, I found them to be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And the hypnopompic state that you're in after sleep, I think, is the moment when the iron is hot and you must strike if you are wanting to remember your dreams. You can do it any way you like. You can have a pen and paper beside your bed. You could pull up your notes app on your phone. You can pull up a voice recorder and just narrate what happened. But the longer you wait to write down or record what happened, the more it is going to evaporate. And you're going to be left with less details. And some of those details might be important, like all those spirit seals that I was shown. So you want to try to get those things out. Like, it might, if you sleep with a partner in the same bed, it might drive them crazy. I know my girlfriend got really angry at me.
It's the main reason I don't have a girlfriend, guys. That's actually the main reason.
I was like under the covers typing like what my dream was, and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I had a very important dream, and I must record it."
Oh, for sure. I keep a cell phone next to my bed. I turn it completely off as far as any kind of signal and stuff like that. Totally different episode to talk about EMFs and blah blah blah. But I just have it ready to go. I have it queued up, ready to go, and I just reach over and I hit record. And I just talk for sometimes a half an hour about everything that I've gone through, and I put it up on the internet. Nobody will get the address to that. It's a very personal thing, but it is up on the internet. But it's just a way for me to keep track of these things. And then every month I go through it and just the stuff that it's like, okay, that situation is far too similar than something that actually happened to me a couple of days later. Like it's incredibly frightening, but incredibly fascinating. Suggestive for everybody. Truthfully, it's wonderful.
Yeah. In particular, Cheryl Lee Black told me once. She sent me the study. I'll have to find a link to it and send it to you. But it was a scientist who he was a skeptic who wanted to disprove the idea of precognitive dreams.
Right.
And so as an experiment, he kept a dream diary for a year, very diligent in this, in the way scientists are. And he realized that he was having precognitive dreams because he had a record of them.
Right.
You might, dear listener, be having precognitive dreams and not even realize it.
I guarantee
you won't
you're having precognitive dreams.
Yeah.
If we are to believe such people, the dreams could very well be future structures built out of past bricks. They are the memories that you have, but we only have the memories to be able to create a future that we haven't seen yet. So it's very cool to try and pay attention to. Active imagination. What is active imagination, Wren?
So that's a tough one because I've done some path working, which is in the sort of Golden Dawn OTO milieu. But the idea being that you are sort of guided into a particular sphere on the tree of life or a particular tarot card or something. And you sort of go into it in your mind and let that experience just play out. And I've had some very interesting experiences doing that. Yeah. I remember one where I was undergoing like an elemental initiation for fire, and we were supposed to sort of go to the realm of fire in our mind and like go through this whole experience. And a whole little narrative played out in my mind. Right. And I just let it play out. I didn't try to influence it. I didn't try to change anything. I just like let it go and just kept following the images. Right. And it told a little story where I was in a desert and I met a man on a camel who led me into the city of brass. And
camel is very thelemic.
Totally. And there was, there were man scorpions and Ifriti. This is very Dungeons and Dragons kind of dream. I went into this large palace and sort of met the elemental ruler of fire. And it was very much like seeing a story play out in your head. And just letting the story play out. In the same way that when you do remote viewing, you're not supposed to put any kind of analytical overlay onto what you're seeing. When you're journeying, in the sense of doing like active imagination, I think it's very important not to try to manipulate or guide what you're being shown. Right. Just go with the flow and like whatever appears in your mind, just let it play out. Yeah. And just relax. And it will take you to interesting places.
Certainly. One of the not tragedies, but active imagination was very fundamental to Carl Jung for a large period of his life, but he never really left a guide. He never had a book where he just basically said how to do active imagination. And if you Google active imagination, there'll be a ton of sites that will come up to tell you how to do that. It's just like everything else, find your way. But definitely what Wren is saying here with if it moves, follow it, for the type of thing, incredibly important. And it's kind of like daydreaming, but it's a little bit more structured. You get in, sometimes daydreams just come up and then they're there. Active imagination is it's inhibitory, but it's a bit more structured and in some way, shape, or form. Out of body experiences, is it the same as astral projection or astral travel?
So I think so. When I read some old books where people talk about soul flight or astral projection, I think they're talking about the same experiences I have.
Okay.
When I was younger, I referred to it as astral projection, but as I've gotten older, I've really shied away from couching it in any occult terminology because it doesn't sufficiently really explain what's going on. And it's one of the few things, I'm like a ceremonial magician. I follow specific procedures and all of this, methods and tools and everything. But out of body stuff is one of the few, I guess, parapsychological or occult interests that I have that I do not couch in any cosmology or framework or anything. Right. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
If it makes you happy to call it astral projection, then whatever. I'm not call it that.
Sure.
It really doesn't matter. Call it whatever you need to call it. But if you're coming out of your body and flying around like a ghost, then we're talking about the same thing. Right. If you are like my mentor and imagining yourself standing in front of yourself and doing the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, then we're not talking about the same thing.
Right. Now, because this has come very naturally to you and you've had these experiences throughout your entire life, do you think that there's a reason that you specifically have out-of-body experiences, Wren?
So there are, I think, certain triggers for people to have these kind of experiences that may get set up at an early age. In particular, Joe McMoneagle had a near-death experience that sort of was followed by him having spontaneous OBEs. Right. So I think trauma is a factor or can be a factor in it.
Okay.
A lot of people report having out-of-body experiences during moments of extreme stress, like car accidents, falling off their bicycle when they were a kid. I remember one guy I know said that right before he had a really bad bicycle accident, he was watching himself on the bicycle.
Right.
And in particular, myself and my brother both suffered some pretty heinous physical abuse when we were kids.
Okay.
And I have often wondered if that created a disassociative state in me, and possibly to him as well, in which...
Your brother has out-of-body experiences as well.
He does, yeah. Even more frequently than myself. Half the time when he calls me on the phone, it's to tell me about his latest OBE. Because we try to compare and share notes.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nice having someone that I can talk to who really knows like what I'm talking about.
Right.
Because that's the tough part, like communicating these things to someone who hasn't had the experience is very difficult. I mean, Whitley Strieber has also talked about having OBEs, some very dramatic ones he details in, I believe, Transformation, the second book, the sequel to Communion. Right. And he has talked about having these sort of traumatic experiments carried out on him, and possibly other children were involved in it. So it's possible, and this could be a trigger for all sorts of side potential, right? Like not just OBEs, but remote viewing, psychokinesis, anything in that realm. I think that trauma can possibly open the door to those things. I know Jason Horsley has written extensively about this. Okay. It is a factor, but it also, too, there are other gateways. So I'm not saying that you had to, you had to get abused or nearly die to have these sort of experiences. I think Robert Monroe, for instance, one of the most famous sort of out-of-body researchers, his initial experience was almost completely mundane. He just saw what looked like a bright light out of his window, and he saw a beam of light come down and sort of enter him, and he felt warm and vibratory, and that's how he had his first experience. Some people have these experiences after seeing a UFO. Like I would almost classify what Monroe had happen to him to initiate that first. It was like a UFO encounter.
Yeah.
So maybe seeing a light in the sky can induce these kind of things. I mean, it's kind of another topic, but I think that the alien abduction experience is happening in an out-of-body state, because why else would you be able to float through your window into the UFO?
Yeah. Again, applying those comparative lenses when you start to go through this stuff, it's just part of you wants to say they're talking about the same thing, but then there's also these details that are so idiosyncratic and just like what? Okay, so they might not be talking about the same thing, but it's incredibly fascinating to me. Definitely don't have out of body experiences the way that you do, but I have had them. Most of the time, I don't seek them out; they just happen, and it's not that they're inconvenient, but it's just like I know when I'm going through one. Again, that whole situation. But my OBEs, specifically, especially ones that are more to do with physical states of being tired or stressed, because I know that is a factor for me. I find that there's a bit of prophecy there. So I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but what are the intersections, you believe, what are the intersections between psi effects and journeying, both kinds of journeying, in your opinion?
Well, I tend to... I feel a little bit silly when I talk about this sometimes, but I do think...
You're amongst friends here, Wren.
Well,
we are the weird. We are the weird.
You mentioned the X-Men earlier.
I did.
And I do think that magic and psi are both kind of one and the same. I think they're two sides of a coin. And I think that certain people just have their superpower, right? Some people are good at OBEs. Some people have precognitive dreams. Some people can move things with their mind. Some people can summon demons. The history of remote viewing is much more tied into parapsychological research, like proper, right? Like people like Charles Tart, charlatans like Andrea Puharich, Hal Puthoff. The history of RV it's much more closely tied up in parapsychology, and it's considered sort of an aspect of psi.
Right.
The OBE stuff, I think, is looked at from the lens of parapsychology, in the sense that there are scientists who have tried to carry out actual studies on it. I mean, Monroe talks a lot about these in Journeys Out of the Body, and he eventually founded the Monroe Institute, which, again, carried out a lot of research on this. In fact, McMoneagle, while he was working as an Army remote viewer, was sent by the Army, or maybe the CIA. I may be getting my details mixed up there. He was sent by somebody to the Monroe Institute to check it out, to see what they were doing. He ended up really, really liking Robert Monroe. They struck up a friendship. He ended up marrying Robert Monroe's daughter.
Really?
Still married, I believe, to this day.
Wonderful.
And you can actually, funnily enough, if you're interested and you want to go dive in the CIA reading room, there's that whole report that was written up about the Monroe Institute is declassified now.
Right. So
you can go back and read what they thought of it. But I believe it's interesting because before, I think, the 1960s, 1970s, things like OBEs were definitely just seen as the purview of occultists.
Right.
Right? Like, the Golden Dawn. I think Blavatsky talks about astral projection and stuff, although they always couch it in all of these.
There's a lot of
there's a lot of cosmology, and there's a lot of ritual involved in it, which I'm here to tell you, dear listener, you don't need to wrap yourself in silver chains and ritual bathe yourself for 3 hours before you attempt to astrally project.
Not unless you want to.
Not unless you want to. If you're into that, I won't stop you. Do as thou wilt.
Right.
That's something that Robert Monroe talks about in Journeys Out of Body again. When he first starts having these experiences, the only place he can find any information on them is within sort of the realms of the occult. And, he hears about these yogis in India who can travel out of their body, but it was considered sort of a talent that only the most ascended of masters could attain. And he was like, I'm not enlightened. I'm just some guy. Why am I having these experiences?
Right.
Funnily enough, I had this exact conversation with my former landlord, who was I think a Taoist. I never really got exactly what he did, but he was sort of magically adjacent, and we had a conversation once about it. I told him about my out-of-body experiences, and he was like, that's something only the masters are supposed to be able to do. And I was like, oh, well, Okay. It's really something that I think maybe through intense study and practice, you can teach yourself how to do it.
Right.
I haven't had the luck of being able to like consciously learn how to control it.
Right.
It's just something that happens.
Right.
And that's too why I've shied away from trying to teach people, quote unquote, how to do this kind of thing, because I'm like, I think it just happens to you.
Yeah.
It's something that you either kind of experience or you don't experience, and nobody's going to be able to tell you how to do it.
Right. I hear that as well. Specifically for out-of-body experiences, that may be the case. I do think that people can learn through, like, you can learn how to dream better. You can learn how to lucid dream. You can learn how to be very effective with active imagination, those kind of things. But yeah, out-of-body experiences, it's a rhinoceros of a phenomena, and you do not tell the rhinoceros when to show up on time. You do not tell the rhinoceros, like, the rhinoceros is going to do what it's going to do. This is an interesting little segue into such things, specifically with something like control. I know we talked about a couple of substances, but what about drugs for you? Do you think drugs are a gateway in some small way to out-of-body experiences or journeying in general?
Yes and no. So I have no problem with entheogen use.
Yeah.
I use them myself, but I consider entheogens a radio, a communications channel between you and a certain spirit or intelligence.
Right.
The experience of taking them may include journeying, it may include out-of-body experiences,
Right.
but it is a more curated and controlled experience. When you take mushrooms, you're going to talk to the mushroom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't take mushrooms and avoid talking to the mushroom. It's part of the experience. I will also say that the out-of-body experience, I've taken a lot of different drugs in my life. And I will say, bar none, a completely sober out-of-body experience is more dramatic than even the most potent Chinese research chemicals I've dabbled in.
Jesus, really?
You know, like I've taken a lot of things that make the curtains look like they're moving, or make my hands create tracers like I'm in some awful music video.
Right.
I've never taken something that let me travel to a different dimension and do battle with a giant boar, you know, like I've had out-of-body experiences like.
Right.
You know, it's not that dramatic.
Yeah.
I would encourage people, you know, if you want to experiment with entheogens, go for it. You know, I think they're valuable tools. You know, I think psilocybin has been immensely helpful to my own mental health. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that they really compare to just the actual, like, sort of out-of-body experience. Now, if we're talking about active imagination journeying, that may be a different question. I know that it is very useful for maybe some people to use like cannabis or other things to sort of relax and get them in the mood to do active imagination.
Right. I'm
I'm just a little bit of a control freak. I know this is very cliche, but I tend to not like to be chemically enhanced when I do things like that.
I hear
because
you,
I don't know how much the drug is like influencing the experience, you know?
I like that you use the word curated experience, because in my experience, that is bang on. Like, I was trying to search for the right word, and then when you sent me the email and used the curated word, I was like, that's exactly what it is. Like, it's definitely you're on that riverboat in Disneyland, and there's the gentleman with the microphone there, and he's taking you on your little journey. That's how it seems to me. My most profound out-of-body experience was when I was younger, and I was with a psychologist, and he was also a hypnotist. And he, for something, forget what it was, because the out-of-body experience kind of hijacked everything, and I was a bit scared to talk to him about it afterwards. But I think he was just using hypnosis to try and help me with anxiety issues and whatnot. And I had a full-blown, like, it was striking. I went to a place in the same city where it was occurring, but it lasted about a half an hour, and it was the most incredible experience ever. What's your take on hypnosis and out-of-body experiences, or journeying in general?
So I think it is an immensely helpful tool. I've read some research papers that have had very promising results for a hypnotic induction of out-of-body experiences. Okay. I think if you want to see a possibly less than ethical example of this, you can watch Hellier, and there is a sort of induced alien abduction experience that they recorded, the Newkirks did at one point. And the problem is, for me, Like, I'm not supposed to get hypnotized because I'm I'm in the OTO and everything.
Right.
It's kind of against the law for me to get hypnotized.
Right.
But I would say on a level, even if it wasn't something that was against my religion,
Right.
I don't trust anyone enough to hypnotize me.
Fair enough. Okay.
Because I don't want anybody planting things in my brain that I don't know that they put there.
Right.
And like I want to control my own, again, the control freak thing. I want to control my own experiences. I don't. Now I think for active imagination, like guided meditation is immensely helpful, like short of actual hypnosis.
Right.
Like I did some EMDR therapy last year, and part of that therapy involved sort of a guided active imagination thing where I would go to a place where I felt comfortable, and I would describe what it looked like, and I would. What does
EMDR stand for?
Or maybe it's EMDR. May have got the acronym wrong, but it's like eye movement, something. Okay. It's like a type of therapy that's used for people with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Got it.
And it involves alternating stimuli. I think it was originally called the thing about eye movement because they would have the therapist would have lights on either side of them that would blink alternately.
Okay.
While you were going through, you would basically mentally go through your traumatic experience again.
Okay. With
the alternating stimuli. Huh. In my experience, it was with little buzzers that were in each hand. Yeah. And so, right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand. They would buzz alternately while I was sort of reliving my trauma.
Right.
And it was immensely helpful. I think it's a wonderful therapeutic method. I don't think it works for everyone, but in my case, it was very helpful. But part of that experience was sort of this guided cool down. Yeah. After going through all this stuff, I would then sort of go to a place where I felt comfortable. In my imagination, it was a tower. Of course, being a wizard, I've got to have a tower with a huge library, and I would travel down into the basement floor of the tower, where I kept a brass vessel, and I would take all of the horrible stuff that I talked about, and I would put it into the vessel and seal it up. And then next time I came back to the therapist, we would go back into the basement and open the brass vessel again so we could examine the things again. Huh. And those guided sessions with that imagery was very vivid in my mind. It was very much like a journeying thing because I came up with all of the details of where I was going. It wasn't the therapist telling me, you're going to this place and it all came from my mind.
Right.
Like I said, that's short of hypnosis, but I think having someone who can kind of guide you through an active imagination exercise, I think that's very useful to have someone sort of leading you through those type of experiences. And if you don't have a problem personally with hypnosis, again, I think hypnotic induction of OBEs is something that holds a lot of promise, and it could be a method for people who haven't experienced it before.
For sure. You mentioned something when we were having our email conversation about food and how food is. How does food enter into the equation for journeying for you?
Well, for OBEs, interestingly enough, one trigger, and feel free to try this out, is eating too much food.
Okay.
In particular, if you've ever read Lon Milo DuQuette's book Low Magic, his sort of first out-of-body experience was after eating entirely too much of his wife's quiche. And the same evening, going to bed completely stuffed, he ends up having an OBE. Right. Now, maybe the things weren't related, but I can say, at least anecdotally, that there have been several occasions where I have, eaten a very large meal and have gotten very tired as a result, like very carb heavy, Chinese food or something. Right. And I go to take a nap and I have an OBE when I go to take a nap. So I kind of wonder if it isn't more easily lulling yourself into that trance state, similar to, physical exhaustion. It's just another method to get relaxed.
Right.
But, it's a pretty easy and legal method. It might be expensive depending on how much you eat.
Might also be a little bit unhealthy.
That too.
Through folklore, for a while, what existed was a folklore of eating cheese can cause bad dreams and night terrors and things of this sort. Even going back to Lon Milo DuQuette's story about, because I believe the quiche was a somewhat cheesy quiche. I haven't read Low Magic in quite a few years. It's a great book. Everybody should definitely read it. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. And if you haven't read Lon Milo DuQuette, he's such a fantastic and funny writer. This whole cheese thing is one of those things. I want, if somebody listening to the podcast is willing to be the guinea pig for this, I want to know if cheese does bring on the on the strange dreams, but if there's certain kinds of cheese that do it better, does a manchego not bring you to dreamland? But I think that it's one of those things. Yeah, that's when you first mentioned this, I was like, man, that's wild. I don't. Yeah, I can't personally say I've had that experience. I'm a snacker. I'll have small portions of things throughout the day, but large meals, I will put my body on the line for this, but it just seems incredibly fascinating. Let's lighten the mood a little bit. Who would some of your favorite journeyers through history be?
Well, I think I've already mentioned him a ton, but definitely Robert Monroe.
So what's his story? Because he has an interesting story.
Yeah, so Robert Monroe, he was I think the executive of a communications company. Like they had a cable television station, radio station and stuff. He was a very technical, very successful businessman.
Yeah.
Who started having spontaneous out-of-body experiences, as I think in his 40s. Right. And he really had no idea how to synthesize any of what he was experiencing. He thought he was going insane or that he might have a brain tumor, no idea what was happening to him. And he eventually sort of explored the experience, was able to sort of get a grasp on what was happening to him, and he ended up writing a wonderful series of books, starting with Journeys Out of the Body, which I think if you're interested in any of this stuff, it's absolutely required reading.
Yeah, I read it years ago, and now because of this episode, I'm going to have to read it again. But I remember distinct parts of it, like I think was it the separation process and very specific parts of it. But I think I have to.
What's interesting about Journeys Out of the Body, to me at least, going back and reading it now that I have gotten more serious about magical studies, right, is how much occult information he becomes aware of without having any background in it at all.
Okay.
Now he couches everything in his own sort of radio,
yes,
kind of terminology.
Feedback is a word that he uses quite a bit.
Exactly. Yeah. When he later talks in the second book, Far Journeys, about traveling, outside the world and seeing sort of this well of souls around the earth, he calls it the M band, like a radio band.
Right.
So he terms all this stuff in his own terminology, but things that he says, he talks about different locales, and I think I mentioned this a little earlier. Like locale 1 is sort of the physical world that we exist in, right, but he also talks about locale 2.
Right.
And locale 2 is where the majority of his experiences take place, and it is, for all intents and purposes, the dream world,
okay,
or the world of spirits. And I quoted a bit from it before, but when I was rereading this and hearing him talk about not only the entities that he encounters there, but the different realizations about the nature of imagination and the nature of how we exist in that state.
Right.
Like I said, beings of pure emotion. It suddenly it clicks in so many places with my own sort of occult studies.
Right.
In a way that fascinates me because, like I said, he has zero background in any of that stuff, but it lends this air of reality to what we all study, because it's like, well, we're not just making it up, because he didn't know any of this stuff, and he's saying some of the same things that we read about in the grimoires,
right,
that we see in all different kinds of places. And it's like there is a shared reality to this stuff that that you don't need a certain cosmology or a certain occult study program or whatever to find, right? Like we all approach it from our own paths, but there's a singular truth to it that is independent of our preconceptions.
Got it. It's odd, it's like police stations back in the 70s that just didn't talk to each other so they wouldn't solve crimes. It's the same thing's happening with the very similar experiences. And the magicians were doing their one things, people from the Monroe Institute, because Monroe, he started a foundation basically to help people with this kind of thing. Can you explain a little bit about what the Monroe Institute does and what their steez is?
So they still exist. He basically founded the Monroe Institute to further study the out-of-body experience. One thing that he's really interested in Journeys Out of the Body is the idea that if only more people had these experiences, the more data we could compile about it, the better we could understand it.
Right.
Like I said, he kind of couches everything in his own scientific mind, and thinks that with more data will come more answers, which
Yeah.
isn't always the case, but he started the Monroe Institute as a way to try to accomplish that. So he trained numerous people in having out-of-body experiences. At least if you believe what the Monroe Institute says, you can be trained to do it.
Okay.
I've never had the good fortune to attend the sort of expensive Gateway Experience retreat there, but he, over decades, I mean, it still exists to this day. I think it's run by his daughter now.
He passed away in 1995, did you know?
Yeah, he did.
And he wrote Journeys Out of the Body in 71.
Yes, that's correct.
He did it for a long period of time. I mean, at least so I think he knew what he was talking about. There was, I did do a little bit of digging up, but there were people from newspapers and journalists that attended the Monroe Institute expecting to find something like the Manson family ranch or something like that, and they just said that these were incredibly very left-brained, very methodical, very kind people, and almost in a way. So it's an interesting that they're still around. I wonder what they're up to these days.
Yeah, it's more. I'm trying to think of an analogy here, but I get what you're saying. It's not really like beyond the Black Rainbow at the Monroe Institute. That's the interesting thing about Monroe's work, is that it is not couched in it's. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day who said it sounded like a cult. And I'm like, well, it doesn't have a religion. It doesn't have a belief system.
Right.
You know, it is basically just trying to research what this out-of-body state is. Now, there is a cosmology that comes into it in his later works.
Right.
But that is only because one of the interesting side effects of having out-of-body experiences is that the reality of the soul becomes completely apparent. Like, it's impossible to, I don't know, like, it's not so much that, like, it proves that there's life after death, although I think it makes a very sound case for it.
Right.
And Monroe brings this up at one point. He says something like, well, nobody's ever told us from beyond the grave about out-of-body experiences, so it could be that the physical body is a required element of the out-of-body experience.
Right.
But then again, he has experiences with people that he details in his books that have recently passed away. You know, he encounters other people who seem to have recently deceased out and about on his journeys. And I think Glon Malu describes similar encounters during his out-of-body experience. And it's interesting. On a personal level, it got rid of any fear of death that I had because I'm like,
Fair enough.
I don't know what's going to happen after I die, but I kind of have an idea of what it's going to be like immediately after I die.
That's wonderful.
Where I go after that, I don't know. But
is there any other figure that really grabs your attention? I mean, I know we talked about Ingo Swann, but is there anybody else that really just like grabs you, or historic even, that just really makes like this person knew something that other people didn't? Is there any of these characters?
You know, I hate to go back to sort of the milieu of the late 60s and 70s, but I mean, still, like, Joe McMoneagle is like one of my heroes. I mean, the way McMoneagle writes about this stuff, and if you read any of his books, you'll get this about him. He is very matter-of-fact about both the reality of it and the challenges that accompany it. He's very quick to cut through the bullshit of other people, because there are a lot of people who talk about remote viewing. There's a lot of people who say they are remote viewers and say that they will teach you remote viewers for the low fee of, $3,999.
I have a problem with the proliferation of astral travel books that exist in probably mainstream bookstores in the New Age occult section. Flipping through them, and it might just be me, and I might just be a contrarian, but it really, the language that they use, and it just does not. Anyways, yes, I agree with you entirely. Yeah.
Well, that goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about not personally couching it in any certain cosmology. Yeah. Because you quickly realize, like I mentioned Robert Bruce's Astral Dynamics earlier. I mean, I still think that's a great book, and it has a lot of useful techniques if you're wanting to experiment with this stuff. But Bruce has his own ideas about what's going on, about the out-of-body experience. He has his own ideas about, like, different layers of reality and the different souls you might have. He's one of those multiple soul theosophist kind of guys. Yeah. And Monroe has his own sort of framework that he interprets these events through.
Right.
And what you come to realize is that none of them really know.
Yeah.
They are all just couching it in their own frameworks based on their own interpretation of it.
Yeah.
You have to just experience it rather than And I think buying into any one person's description of the experience cheapens it somewhat too, because when you actually have this experience, I want everyone to take it on their own terms and not overlay any expectations onto it. Like we mentioned earlier about seeing the silver cord.
Right.
I've never seen a silver cord, so if you don't see it, like you
don't
may
feel
still
bad.
Be having
Don't feel
yeah,
bad.
don't feel bad. Yeah.
That goes back to the very the personal nature of what we are describing. It really is, and I'm definitely with you there as far as I find the most interesting aspects of journeying, specifically with people's accounts of journeying, ones where they do not wish to explain what is happening. They don't couch it within some strange cosmology. For my money, this comes maybe as no surprise to anybody, but Sweezy E, or Emanuel Swedenborg, is kind of a guy when you read about his journeys around the planets, they're very strange, and of course there's this Christian veneer to it, but they're describing things that are, at least to me, incredibly familiar, and the denizens of the places that he visits and the spirits, it's all wonderful and it's in there, but he doesn't try to say like, this is because this happened to me and whatnot. I think that has a real element to it. We have to go to this place, so let's go deeper down the rabbit hole here. What might these denizens or entities, because I have had this experience, certainly, nothing so much as, say, like a Whitley Strieber experience, but what would you say in your experience of out-of-body experiences? What the hell's with the entity stuff, man?
Well, as a magician, I kind of just see them as spirits. I mean, you're on their turf when you travel out of body. And that is the thing I also want to not necessarily warn people about. I don't want to scare them off from doing this. No. But I do want to tell them that not everything is love and light out in the dreamlands. There's things out there who want to eat you, and there's things out there who want to teach you. Yeah. And when you're out there, and Monroe is very explicit about this, and in my own experience, it's very true. You are as strong as you believe you are.
Right.
So take it from me, if you run into anything out there giving you guff, do not take any shit from it. Speak your true voice and make it go away. But then again, too, when I first started having, I guess, more dramatic out-of-body experiences over the last several years, probably the last 2 or 3 years, I've had some of the most dramatic ones. Remember how I mentioned before about Monroe talking about how you're sort of driven by your emotions when you're out?
Yes.
He in particular was very driven in his early experiences by fear. Okay. He was scared that he was dying. He was scared of the entities he was encountering. He was scared of everything. And sort of his sexual desires. Okay. He was constantly wanting to have sex with everything he found out there. Well, for me, it was anger.
Okay.
And maybe it's my, I was born on a Tuesday in the hour of Mars while Mars was in Aries. So maybe I'm a little martial, but I tended to fight everything I met out there.
You seem so placid when I'm talking to you here, though, Wren.
I know. Like, I'm completely normal here. No, he mentions a part that he's like, if people acted like you act when you go out of body, you'd be considered psychotic. And I've actually had these instances where I would have these, OBEs or even lucid dreams in which I just carry out the most insane acts of murder and mayhem. And I remember one time in particular, I was in this huge brawl with all these other Viking-looking guys, and I'm like smashing heads in, and somebody I have never met before, but I know of, appeared in the dream. And they looked at me and were horrified. And I was like, oh dear, I'm so sorry that we had to meet under these awkward circumstances.
It's amazing. Had you just watched the movie Roadhouse, by the way?
And a lot of my early experiences are very couched in this. I keep using that word couched.
That's fine.
It must be on the mind tonight.
I hear you.
A lot of my early experiences are very much me going out there and getting into fights with things.
Okay.
Like I mentioned, the giant boar.
Right. And
I have never met anything out there I couldn't beat, except in one case, and that was the lesson and the entity that taught me maybe I shouldn't be going out and fighting every single thing I find out there. It was a very I'm not familiar. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Journey to the West, but it was my Sun Wukong meets the Buddha moment,
Okay.
where I learned that I have limits.
Monkey Journey to the West. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah.
So it involved me being sort of trapped in this building or this little house with this bald lady who wouldn't let me pass, and I tried yelling and I tried screaming, and I could see the exit right there. But every time I would try to go down the hallway that led to the exit, the more I struggled, the more the hallway would contract until it was, completely squeezing me. It was like, the harder I fought, the more trapped I became.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I relaxed and went over to the lady and gave her a kiss that I was allowed to leave.
Huh.
And when I woke up, I was like, okay, I get it. Like, maybe I need to try talking once in a while instead of just trying to fight everything I find, or just assume that everything out there is like trying to get me.
Right.
And it's tough because some things are out there trying to get you. Yeah. Like, I've had the experience of this is one of the most fascinating, because I've heard this anecdotally from other people too, but the idea of you being captured while you're out there, or yanked away. I remember I had one experience where I wanted to go to the moon. I wanted to take the Ingo Swann full, Disneyland ride.
Let's have a look.
Yeah. So I try to go to the moon. I overshoot a little bit. I did end up in orbit around a moon, but it was one of Jupiter's moons. So it was very cool to see Jupiter, giant, filling my entire field of vision with this moon in the foreground. But I only got to enjoy it for a second before I felt myself being like yanked back by something.
Got it.
And I ended up in this room that looked like it reminded me of like a kindergarten, cement block walls, like a very sort of dreary school setting.
Got it.
And there were these other people who were sort of wandering around aimlessly, and I was like, this is boring, I'm out of here. So I tried to fly through the wall, and I couldn't. I smacked on the wall, and I was like, solid, I can't leave.
Right. I
turned around and saw this little kid like smiling at me in a chair, the sort of like shit-eating grin, like, I know something that you don't.
Right.
And I got extremely angry and started yelling, and ended up scaring them into letting me go.
Got it.
I was able to like get out of there just through force of will, because I think I scared whatever it was, because I was then in a sort of house, and I had these like large sort of windows in the front of the house, and I look out and look into the street, and there's that same kid, and I start like yelling and banging on the windows, and he gets terrified and runs away, and I like burst through the windows and chase after him. And these experiences are so strange because these entities, like, I think that all of the angels, all of the demons, all of everything, the gods, I think they all live out there.
Yeah.
I think they're all in there.
There is an objective reality to them somehow, strangely enough. Yeah. I hear you.
Exactly.
Now, this is something that really interests me. If you live a very rich dream world life, what would be your suggestion, not suggestion, but what would be your thoughts about embodying the imaginal in the real world? Say you dream of something, and then you somehow get a message that is something you have to do in your life, or could be something like an object. What do you think is going on there with that? Because you told me a short little story about something that happened to you somewhat recently, but what do you how do you think about something like this?
I think this can be a really interesting avenue to pursue.
Yeah.
It is something I think that has a rich history. I think lots of people have had dreams about things that they later go on to create, or seeing maybe a story in their dreams that they later make into a novel, or hearing a piece of music in a dream that they then, and that brings up the interesting question, like, which came first?
Yeah.
Did you really come up with this idea? Was it really in your head, or was it out there somewhere and you stumbled upon it?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, I recently had I've had a series of dreams now in which I'm hunting for these sort of artifacts. Right. Like in particular, I was on some sort of quest solving these steganographic puzzles to finally be led to a mansion in the jungle where I was met by these guys who said they were part of the Trithemius organization.
Okay. And
they presented me with the eye, which was this sort of ebony sphere.
Okay.
Like a perfectly smooth, round ebony sphere. Unfortunately, I woke up before I got a chance to ask them what it was for or how to use it. But the very next day, I get a text message from one of my lodge brothers who said that they had a lathe they wanted to get rid of if I wanted it.
Score.
So, I have a dream about this object.
Yep.
By coincidence, the next day, I am presented with the equipment that I would need to make that object.
Right.
So it just kind of sounds like something wants me to make that object. I don't know what it's for or what it's going to do, but
Yeah.
I think you should listen to those things.
Yeah, I entirely. I mean, barring murder, obviously, people, for fuck's sake. I think that there's a huge amount of validity, and I've never been steered wrong as far as not just entities, but if there's something in your dream and it seems so utterly familiar that it has to be carried into, I hate the term, the real world. Or the waking world is maybe a better way of putting it. I've seen great riches and great rewards with carrying things out that I've dreamed about, and it has this closing the loop quality to it that I think is incredibly beneficial. And if you haven't tried it, definitely go for it, and not just for something, say, like an object, but even tasks, things like this. There's a dream I had about leaving a bent coin as an offering to a certain saint, and I went on a little journey to a certain church, and strange things started happening after that. It lean into it is basically what I'm trying to say as far as the embodying of things that you might just seem like that was an odd dream. Follow up on it, truthfully. Very odd phenomena occurs when this kind of thing happens, and it's so fun and fascinating. Astral bodies, subliminal selves, even can go so far as the psyche and soma, or the ba and the ka for ancient Egyptian cosmology. Why these words for this phenomena? Why do you think that this is a thing?
I think it's because people are grasping at synthesizing an experience that is common to us throughout human history. I think they're integral to the human condition.
Okay.
And we all want to put it in some form that makes sense to us. And whether that be through our own culture or religion, or in Monroe's case, his sort of technical background,
right.
We all form to something in order to really, it's okay to have ideas about what is going on here. But my big warning is that, like, you can't completely trust other people's descriptions of what's going on.
Right.
That's why, again, I don't approach it with any sort of real cosmology. If I was being a good Thelemite, I would say something like, the Cobbs is in the coup, not the coup in the Cobbs.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's true. Like, I don't know. Like, I have a sort of, I tend to have a kind of Greek view of this, like the idea of like the soma and the psyche, right? You have a material body and you have a spirit, right? And I think like just starting there is like a good place to begin. And then if you like the Egyptian conception of like this multi-part soul, and that speaks to you, like, by all means, but you really need to have the experiences yourself so you can figure out for yourself what is going on. I don't know, you may not even be able to. I know we mentioned before the inability to determine if precognition is, retrocausal in nature, or if it's some sort of time loop, and it's impossible for us to tell because we are in it. We are in space-time, and it is we cannot examine it from outside the box.
Right.
Right. You probably can't examine the nature of your own soul until maybe after you're dead. I don't know. I think I was gonna have something profound to say there, and I lost the thread.
Well, in a way, I think that is profound. I think what you're saying, more than anything, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm putting words in your mouth, have the experience first. You don't need to have an explanation for what you haven't experienced yet. That is
exactly.
That is a really crucial thing. Aim towards the phenomena, aim towards the experience, and then you can extrapolate afterwards, truthfully, because such things had happened to me from a very young age. I had terrible sleep paralysis. I had terrible sleeping. I went 25 years of my life just not being able to sleep, and so my mind would just go into incredible places. It took me a while to get there, but I had this vast pool from which to be able to tack on any kind of explanation that I wanted to. But even to this day, I still haven't. I mean, I do enjoy the idea of an Egyptian New Kingdom, Akbaka, kind of thing, but that's a very personal thing, and I would never to somebody sit them down and be like, here's what's happening when you're doing this. Like that's not my way. And again, to go back to the flipping through books in the Barnes and Noble New Age occult section, as soon as I start seeing that, I just throw the book away, or I just not throw it away, but obviously just put it right back on the shelf. It just seems deleterious to the whole process. So stick with the experience, because that is an incredibly crucial part of your journey. Like, not just your journey of journeying, but your journey itself, I believe. So
Definitely.
big question, final question. Why do we do this, Wren? Besides the fact that, I mean, the ones that you can't control, why even do the ones that you can in some way control?
So I think the reason we do these experiences, like I kind of touched on this before, about it being your primary interface with the spirit world and intelligences that are beyond human. It's also incontrovertible proof to yourself that you are more than your physical body, that you're not a biological computer, a piece of flesh clockwork just moving through the universe that has no meaning to it. It is a personal experience of the sublime and of the imaginal. And I think I wrote to you in my email that these experiences are our starships. Like, within every single one of us, you have a warp drive, you have a starship. And you can use your starship to explore not only our physical universe, but the realms of imagination, the realms of spirits, infinite number of parallel worlds. They're all open to you. And these experiences are how we go there.
Wonderful. I absolutely love it, and I definitely resonate very, very clearly with that. Of course, we're far more complex than anything that we've been told. I do not think that explanatory finality, as far as this phenomena has occurred, it probably won't occur in our lifetimes. And truthfully, to answer that question, it would be to answer the question of the soul itself in a way. But I love the idea of us all having access to this warp drive, whether it be through dreams, whether it be through active imagination, whether it be through remote viewing, whether it be through involuntary out-of-body experiences. We all have access to this, and lean into it and go with it, because there's just so many options, and it really is a beautiful, wonderful thing, for sure. Wren, fantastic. This has been an unbelievable. I'm so glad that we took that time to say, well, I mean, I think we would have probably had a pretty good conversation about demons, but I think that this is really something that you champing at the bit to talk about this kind of thing.
That's true. I mean, I have referred to some of these experiences. I've talked sort of around it on different podcasts, like Where Did the Road Go? Right. But I've never really done a whole show just about it as a topic. Yeah. And you're right. Like, I know a few things about demons. I know a few things about magic, but this material is the thing that I have the most lived experience of, more than any of my other pursuits.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. It has been an absolute wonder to have you here. I really hope that if I was to ask you to come back on the show, you would, Wren, because I've had a fantastic time. We've been recording for over 2 hours, and it's just gone by like a journey, if you will. But I'd love to have you back on the show if you'd be able to.
Absolutely, anytime. Wonderful.
So that's the show, everybody, on Journey. I hope we've given you some directions to go, and I hope that we've given a couple of tips and whatnot. But more than anything, I think trust yourself and experiment and try new things, and don't just go off of somebody else's word as to this is how you do it, A to B. Stuff your face full of cheese if you have to. Get a really beautiful quiche if you need to. Wake up 3 times during the night if you need to. There are tips and tricks. Try them all. Guess what? Find your way. And when you do, my God, you will never look back, because it's such a wonderful, wonderful experience. So that's the show, everybody. If you want, head to whatmagicisthis.com. There you will find ways to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, on Spotify. Hey, if they've got podcasts, I am listed. Also, on my website, you will find a link to Twitter, to Instagram, as well as to Facebook. Wren is on Twitter. I will, with his permission, of course, put up his Twitter account, because he does have out-of-body experiences, I'd say at least couple of times a week, man. Like you're
Maybe
just
not that frequent, but
no.
yeah, close to it. I don't know.
I'm always riveted, especially you had this dream one time where you were talking about you were with your brother and a carp was involved or something like that, and it was just I don't remember if you remember, but I certainly do because I just had to text you back like, man, when are you writing the book? Because when are you writing the screenplay? Because that's just a
Oh, you mean the one, yeah, where I was like a little girl and it
yeah.
was, I was taken to a sort of tent revival where I was forced, sort of to channel a spirit and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, that was an intense dream.
I love it. But yes, head to whatmagicisthis.com. Also, follow Wren. Wren does other work outside of being just a fantastic person to talk to on the internet and on a podcast. I'll have some links to his stuff as well. Also on whatmagicisthis.com, I have show notes for every single thing that I talk about. Every character that Wren has brought up, there will be numerous show notes for these people and resources to look at, and I'm sure that Wren will send me some really wonderful links that he's come across as well. If you like the show, please leave a rating for me. Anywhere is fine, but I think that iTunes is the one that's really appreciated. If you like the show, give the star clicky thing, that's cool. But if you want to say something about me, type a couple of words. That would be greatly, greatly appreciated. If you have an experience that you want to share, if you have a question, please reach out to me. I'm a very, very approachable guy. I will respond to you, I guarantee it. Also, I have a Patreon. So if you like the work that I'm doing, please head over to Patreon and give some support. I do a ton of work on this podcast. It's one of those things that I've shocked that I didn't do it earlier in my life, but who knows? I might have just been sharpening my axe. But if you really want to support the work that I do on this show, please head over to Patreon. But if not, you don't want to do the whole monthly thing and you just feel like throwing me some filthy lucre, I also have a PayPal me button on my website. Any bit helps. It really, really does, and I'd appreciate it graciously and with open arms, truthfully. And just to wrap up here, we have to end the show with the post-show quid pro quo. Wren, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Speaking as a Thelemite, what would be something that would be welcoming about the work and life of Aleister Crowley? And what is something to be wary of?
So I think welcoming. I think that if you can understand what is meant by do it thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, it is a beautiful, incredible, liberating way to live your life. If you are able to get beyond the idea that it is a carte blanche to treat people badly or to indulge in your most hedonistic fantasies, because it's not. And if you think that, you don't really understand what do what thou wilt means.
Right.
I think that the Book of the Law is a beautiful work of channeled literature. It's one of my it's a book that has comforted me in stressful times. I get a lot out of reading it, so it's another part of sort of being a Thelemite that I really enjoy. I think the people that I've met in the OTO, people like Rufus Opus, Harper Feist, Michelle Montserrat, Scott Stenwick, these friendships and mentorships have really enhanced not only my magical practice, but just my lived experience. Mm-hmm. I think documents like Liber Oz, which is sort of the Thelemic Bill of Rights,
right,
I think very succinctly sums up like how I try to live my life. Okay. I think that as far as things to be wary of, well, I've talked enough shit that I'm probably gonna get expelled at some point anyway. But I am not really that hot on the OTO as an organization. Okay. So I want to very much tell people that you do not have to be in the OTO to be a Thelemite, okay, or to practice Thelema in your own life. They have no more a hold on Thelema than the Catholic Church has on Christianity. Got it. They're simply one facet of it. Now, some OTO buddies, like my local one, I've had wonderful experiences with. The leadership is great. I have not been privy to any horrible things happening to anybody there, but that can't say the same about other lodges. I've heard plenty of horror stories. Yeah. So just be careful out there. Yeah. No matter who you talk to. There are a lot of charlatans, and there are a lot of people in all sorts of magical communities who are very eager to abuse people. So just, keep your head on your shoulders. But, you should also sort of be wary of there is an element in the Lema that sees Crowley's work and sees sort of the laws of the Lema as a way for them to act out their sort of fascist desires.
Yeah.
And those people, I think, have no real understanding of the work. They have no real understanding of what will is and what Crowley wrote in the Book of the Law. Right. And Crowley himself was just a man. Yeah. And he had a lot of problems, and he did a lot of bad things to people. But that doesn't change the fact that the Book of the Law was not written by Crowley.
Right.
It was dictated to him. So I think the message of Thelema is something that I truly appreciate, and has been a wonderful sort of addition to my life over the past couple of years. And
amazing. Yeah. Wonderful. Perfect answer. Wren, we'll have to have you back on the show. This has been so much fun. Man, just so much to go off of here. I can't believe that was 2 hours of recording, because and I feel like we just scratched the surface. I really do think that but man, thank you so much. I'm so happy to finally have you on the show, and I know there was a little bit of it was bouncing all over the place in a lot of time, but we finally made it, and I'm so happy that you were able to share your experiences. And so thank you so much for being on the show, Wren.
Yeah, absolutely. Honored to be here.
Perfect. And that's the show, everybody, on journeying. I had a fantastic time. So if you want more of this kind of stuff, tune on in again to What Magic Is This? We're going to talk about some crazy, crazy stuff, no doubt. And until then, I want you to stay hopeful, stay healthy, and stay luminous. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.